I'm Aaron Porras, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Hamas gets ready for a potential war. Israel starts handing out deportation notices to African asylum seekers, and Israeli Pop-Star Shiri Maimon gets ready to break out on Broadway. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Rocket alarms followed by the sound of an explosion erupted over the weekend in southern Israel after a rocket was launched from Gaza at Israeli territory. The army has launched an immediate retaliation as usual, striking 2 Hamas military targets in the Strip.
So far, no specific group has claimed responsibility for the rocket attack. Regardless, the IDF holds Hamas responsible for any and all projectiles that come out of the enclave. Though these rounds of rocket attacks and Israeli retaliations are almost habit by now, especially following Trump's controversial Jerusalem decision last December, Hamas apparently believes that there's a, quote, 95% chance that Israel will start a war mere days from now. The terror organization predicts that the war will coincide with a large IDF drill being conducted in southern Israel. Meanwhile, Ahed Tamimi, the Palestinian teenager who was arrested after being filmed slapping Israeli soldiers in apparent efforts to provoke them, remains in jail for nearly 2 months now.
عهد بتعني زي ما بتعني كل أسير فلسطينية كل حدا ناضل ضد هذا الكيان وعهد وحدة منهن بفكر إنه عهد كمان جابت هاي القوة النسائية القوة تبعت الطفولة كمان بديش كمان أسمي هيك نسائية بفكر كمان فيهم طفولة جزء كتير طفولة تبعت المعاناة تبعت الأطفال والطفلات كمان ضمن الحياة اللي بعيشها الفلسطينيين في الاحتلال.
But the teenager's case has already made her a global icon of Palestinian resistance. Case in point, Tamimi just turned 17 while sitting in prison, prompting support letters from nearly 700 American Jews, as well as a birthday cake.
The Interior Ministry has just notified nearly 20,000 asylum seekers from Africa that they have now been slated for deportation, making good on the government's threat to begin removing them by force if necessary. TV's Brett Allen Smith is here now with the update. Brett, I know that protests have been ramping up here in Israel against this controversial plan. Is it working?
Well, I want to make something clear here. The people who've just gotten these notification slips, these 20,000 asylum seekers, according to the government, they're only single men of working age. But make no mistake here, because every last man, woman, and child from this community are fearing for their lives right now. This is a dark day for them because the government has made it very clear that the next wave of notifications, it's coming for them.
I see. Now, I want to talk a moment about that because I know that on these slips, the government claims that they're being deported to a safe, quote, tremendously developed country in Africa, which most believe to be Rwanda, but it's undisclosed. So why so much fear if that's the claim?
Well, probably because most of the people here, frankly, don't believe that. And to be honest, there may be very good reasons for that. Israel has already deported thousands of asylum seekers to Rwanda over the past few years. And those stories of human trafficking, kidnapping, torture, their own governments hunting them down, those stories have all made their way back here. And that's just one reason why developed countries typically never do what Israel is now mobilizing to do, as you'll see now in the rest of my report. Despite international protests from Jewish leaders across the world, including doctors, rabbis, and former diplomats here in Israel, the state has doubled down on its mission to begin deporting Africans starting in April.
When a stranger sojourns amongst you, you have to give him the best place to live in the country. You must give him the best jobs. Okay? This is written in the Bible. It's not, I didn't invent it.
So far, only single men have received the first notice slips. They now have the difficult choice of choosing deportation to a third-party country or else be jailed indefinitely for refusing to leave. Prison officials are warning the government that there is not nearly enough space to accommodate the expected surge, and so far there seems to be no backup plan in place. Interior Minister Ali Aderi has said this wave of single men will precede the deportation of every other man, woman, and child from Africa in the coming year. The state has branded this population as illegal infiltrators, but the majority, mostly Christians from Eritrea and Sudan, are accepted almost unanimously as legal refugees across the world.
בן של ניצול שואה, את רואה? זה אבא שלי, יש לו מספר על היד. אין פליטים, הם מסתננים נטו. איך הם עושים את ההשתקעות הזאת? הם מביאים ערימות של ילדים. כל אישה מגיל 6 עד גיל 60 בהיריון.
But for some, the parallel to Jewish history, especially with the Holocaust, is the biggest reason of all to protect these asylum seekers. Dozens of Holocaust survivors are now prepared to hide Africans in their homes to save them from what they say would be a similarly horrific fate if they were deported back to Africa.
In what many would call a shocking video released by former Israeli minister and Mossad agent Rafi Eitan, Eitan expresses his support for right-wing extreme German party Alternative for Deutschland, or AfD. He even goes on to say that he hopes AfD's policies will be adopted and turn into a, quote, alternative for Europe. Well, joining me now to take a closer look at Eitan's comments is Davidi Herman, the president of the International Center for Public Diplomacy in Israel. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, so my first question to you is, what do you think of Eitan's comments?
I think this comment came a little bit too early, because unlike right-wing parties in Austria or in the Netherlands, where we can see a little bit of experience with their behavior, in Germany, the right-wing party is without a long enough record to judge if they are really anti-Semitic or maybe they are legitimate right-wing. And I also think that in the case of Angela Merkel, which is the biggest political opponent of this party, because they are the voters of the extreme right in Germany, they do it directly against her politics. So she is such a good friend of Israel. So to insult her during the sensitive political situation in Germany, I'm not sure it was the right thing to do. From the other hand, I wouldn't be the first one to come and say we will never have connections with Alternative for Deutschland.
All right, so along those same lines, AfD has been accused since its inception of being anti-Semitic, or at the very least of being a very divisive party. Do you see a possibility for friendship with them then, given that identity?
As I said, I see possibility, but I think it's too early to have a policy. Okay. I think in this time, we should let them to show how they behave in practice, not by declarations. And I don't want to compare, but we have very challenging, let's say, Foreign Affairs Minister of Germany, Mr. Sigmar Gabriel, and he defined in the past Israel as an apartheid state, and he supports Shovrim Shtika, breaking the silence, etc. So practically, some people would call this a kind of anti-Semitism. I don't say he's anti-Semitic, but it is very
attitudes.
Yes, very, very, very strange. Should I say attitude? So maybe the possibility of future coalition between the Christian Democrats of Merkel and Alternative for Deutschland would be better for Israel compared to the unity government with the Social Democrats, practically. But still, because of all the historic complex, I wouldn't be the first one to legitimate them, especially while Dr. Merkel herself doesn't like it.
I see. All right. Well, Davidi Herman, thank you very much for coming in. That was a pleasure. Thank you. All right. A bombshell new report suggests that the Russian-Israeli meeting that took place earlier this week was a Russian attempt to halt Israeli airstrikes in southern Lebanon and Syria. Prime Minister Netanyahu met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow around the same time, informing him that Israel will take divisive preventative actions against Iranian threats in the region. Ironically, the Russian delegation here in Israel was apparently trying to stop Israeli attacks on these exact same targets.
Indeed, IDF airstrikes in Lebanon and Syria have often put Israel at odds with Moscow. Israel believes that Iran has pumped millions of dollars into Hezbollah, equipping them with cutting-edge weapons. Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman has suggested that at this rate, the region could simply become one big Iranian missile factory. Putin aligned himself with Syrian President Assad in 2015, backing his regime against the rebels in bloody civil war. But the power vacuum has left a massive opening for Iranian footholds and weapons depots right on Israel's doorstep. If these reports are true, Russia may have deeper stakes in the Middle East than previously assumed. But Israel has already demonstrated time and time again that it will act to defend its security interests no matter what.
Now, another shocking report has detailed the unseen depths of Israeli-Egyptian security cooperation. The New York Times claims that Israeli military forces have carried out more than 100 airstrikes in the Sinai Peninsula, coordinated with Egypt to help suppress the Islamic State insurgency in the region.
Though Israel and Egypt have an open alliance and frequently collaborate on security, especially on the Gaza border, Egyptian President Sisi has kept these airstrikes classified because diplomacy with Israel remains very unpopular among the majority of Egyptians. The collaboration allegedly began as far back as 2014. The IDF's attacks were apparently effective enough that it completely changed the Islamic State's strategy in Sinai. Originally, terrorists were targeting higher-profile targets such as the Russian charter jet incident in October of 2014. But they later switched to softer targets, such as mosques and churches, after Israeli airstrikes sent them on the run. Neither Israel nor Egypt has confirmed or denied these reports.
Debate continues to storm around Poland's controversial new bill, which makes it illegal for anyone to refer to Nazi concentration camps on Polish soil as, quote, Polish death camps, and that includes Auschwitz. Despite promising to work with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to help amend the bill, the Polish Senate passed it anyway just a few days ago. It must now only be signed by Poland's president to become a law. Rights groups all over the world, as well as nearly all Israeli leaders, immediately condemned the bill when it was announced last week. And in a bitter twist, Poland announced that the bill less than 24 hours before commemorating International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which was held ironically outside the gates of Auschwitz. But despite what may have been ill timing, Poland has only doubled down on the bill's importance.
Kłamstwo oświęcimskie to nie tylko negowanie niemieckich zbrodni, ale również inne sposoby fałszowania historii. Jedną z najgorszych form tego kłamstwa jest pomniejszanie odpowiedzialności rzeczywistych sprawców i przypisywanie tej odpowiedzialności ich ofiarom. Chcemy walczyć z tym kłamstwem w każdej jego postaci. Właśnie dlatego nowelizujemy ustawę o Instytucie Pamięci Narodowej. Obozy, w których wymordowano miliony Żydów, nie były polskie. Ta prawda musi być chroniona, ponieważ jest częścią prawdy o Holokauście.
Germany's own foreign minister has backed at least some of this position, saying that Germany bears the full and sole responsibility for the horrors of the Holocaust, quote, and no one else, end quote. The EU, however, has acknowledged what many already have, that the bill dangerously rewrites one of the darkest chapters in human history by potentially erasing certain Polish complicity during Hitler's, quote, final solution.
But we all have to face the facts. All those countries who were under Nazi occupation during the Second World War had many, many heroes who resisted and who fought against that occupation. But sadly, in all those countries, there were always people that could be found to collaborate with the Nazi occupiers to implement their horrendous agenda.
But as the horrors of the Holocaust continue to become more and more distant, some worry that laws like this only serve to obscure some of the most precious lessons of all.
ואמא עוד כשהיינו בגטו, תמיד הכינה לי קר גדול מפלא פוך, שבשבילי, בגודל שלי זה היה שמיכה ולא קר. אני עומד איתה, מחזיק את היד. ואיך שאנחנו עומדים ככה, ורעש, הכלבים נובחים, הרובים יורים, הקטר משמיע את הרעש, הקיטור שלו. ואמא בשבריר של שנייה תופסת אותי בשתי ידיי ככה, וזורקת אותי הלאה, ממנה לכיוון של הגברים, וצועקת, תולק! נפתלי, קח את הג'סקו, קח את הילד. ואני נזרקתי ממנה אליו. ואני צעקתי, מאמה, אני לא רוצה תולק.
Police in Colombia have just made a massive drug arrest. The suspect is a 35-year-old Israeli man who police believe is connected to a huge drug ring funneling illegal weapons and cocaine into Israel. He is also suspected of engaging in human trafficking. The suspect's name is Benjamin Cohen. He can be seen here smiling for the cameras, moments before Colombian narcotics and police forces expelled him back to Israel. Cohen will now face multiple charges for suspected drug and human trafficking here in his home country. But this is actually the second such arrest and expedition of an Israeli from Colombia on such charges. Asi Ben Mouche was expelled by Colombian authorities in November based on both drug and human trafficking warrants as well. When he landed at Ben Gurion Airport, he pleaded innocence and said, quote, "They brought me here by force. They kidnapped me without a court order," end quote. Now, he did confess to being a, quote, big shot in Colombia, but has insisted that all his actions were legal. Then, just a few days ago in the United States, yet another Israeli suspect has just pleaded guilty to charges of drug trafficking as well. 34-year-old Jalal Al-Taghabin will now await his sentencing from a Boston court, which could very well be a life sentence. Al-Taghabin was indicted for intent to distribute 5 kilos of cocaine, as well as 6 counts of international money laundering, allegedly in a conspiracy to transfer $2.5 billion worth of cocaine from Colombia to Israel. The IDF has just announced a massive all-out military simulation slated for later this year in the south. The drill will involve the entire paratroopers brigade in full gear, making this the largest exercise of its kind in nearly 6 years.
This comes at a time when tensions have been skyrocketing on 2 fronts, between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon and along the Gaza border. The scale of the drill certainly adds to the growing atmosphere that Israel may be bracing for large-scale military conflict as well. This will be the first live exercise to involve the Super Hercules aircraft, also known as the Samson here in Israel. The massive plane can be refueled in midair, fly at extreme long ranges, and carry enormous cargo, including vehicles, troops, and even wounded soldiers. The Army has also just begun another significant military drill for the Army's Southern Command forces. Though IDF officials say it was a regularly scheduled drill planned well in advance, Hamas leaders say it signals an incoming Israeli intention to start a war in Gaza in the coming days. Though statements like these and threats of war in general are nothing new, anxieties are definitely beginning to escalate. This time, they could be for real.
An estimated 500 million people suffer from diabetes, a disease in which a person's blood sugar levels are way too high. And shockingly, another 500 million are pre-diabetic. One of the most important ways to manage the disease, or for some to prevent it entirely, is maintaining a healthy diet. And joining us now with a solution that may help is Ran Hirsch, the co-founder and CEO of A1C Foods. Thank you very much for coming in. I'm very excited to talk about this. So tell me a little bit about what you've created. I see chocolates, and I'm definitely going to eat one.
Yeah, what we have here is our first product. Basically, our company has developed a unique formula, which is patent pending, that allows using normal carbohydrates in food and still have very low glycemic index, which is the impact of what you eat on your blood sugar levels. So now these pralines of chocolate and almonds, which some of you tested before and really liked.
Yeah, how was the test? It was good, yeah?
It was very good.
I'm going to try it again.
Please. So they taste very good and still
yes, they do.
Have very, very little impact on your blood sugar levels, even none at all. So what we are trying to achieve, we believe in A1C that a good, healthy diet is a low-carb diet. But we still think that low-carb diet can be delicious and can be, we believe food should be pleasurable and with lots of fun in it.
Well, I mean, if every product tastes like this, I think you've hit the mark, because this is amazing. I just want to say.
Thank you.
And I love dark chocolate, and with almonds, I mean, I'm sold. Yeah. So how did you come up with this idea? And I'm just going to move this a little closer. How did you come up with this?
All right. My partner is Dr. Mariela Glant. She's a specialist in diabetes care. And she treats patients more through diet than through medications. And what she saw was that there are many, many recipes and websites, but very few actual products that you can buy and eat for a low-carb diet, and especially very low glycemic diet. So she got the need through that, and I found the need because I have amazing 11 daughter, well, 11 years daughter, which has type 1 diabetes, and through that I kind of
inspired you to.
Exactly, I just saw that she has to compromise almost on everything.
Wow.
So like.
Okay, so what has the impact been so far? I'm sure your 11-year-old daughter is in love.
Yeah, we have, you see the chocolates here, but we have amazing breads, we have pizzas, we are working on an amazing ice cream with an amazing ice cream chef called Guy Tashkent. We are building a very large line of products, and of course I'm testing them at home on my children.
And when will they be available?
Hopefully in the next month or two, the chocolates would come out to the public. Wow. The breads are just being finalized for mass producing in a very big factory, and the ice cream also.
Wow. So, I'm blown away by this. It's absolutely amazing. And Ran Hirsch, co-founder and CEO of A1C Foods, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you very much.
All right, now we've got some bad news now, NBA fans. Israel's very first pro basketball player might be about to get traded off the Golden State Warriors, all because of his three-pointers, or actually more specifically because of his failure to hit his three-pointers.
Israeli basketball superstar Omri Caspi started off this season very strong, but when the NBA trade deadline arrives in just a few days, he might find himself booted from the Oakland bench. Apparently, his stats for three-point shots aren't where the team wants, despite his strong play on offense. Caspi, of course, made headlines as the first ever Israeli to make it to the NBA back in 2009. The Golden State Warriors are the 6th team in the pro league he's played for, and rumor has it that some mid-season injuries may have given him some problems on the court. But when it comes to basketball, everything's about stats. Fans might want to prepare themselves to trade in those Oakland jerseys for something new when the trade deadline hits on Thursday.
All right, now this next story is nuts. Ever heard of the Voynich manuscript? It's a mysterious 600-year-old book written in a completely unknown language, featuring bizarre and seemingly random drawings. Now, this book has become the stuff of legends, a modern-day lore whose unknown secrets have been the speculations of scientists, code breakers, and even Avengers comic books. But a team of Canadians say that they've now finally cracked the code, and get this, it's apparently written in encrypted Hebrew.
The newly published study has erupted a media frenzy all over the world surrounding one of the most mysterious and uncracked codes of all time. The Voynich manuscript contains 250 pages, most of them heavily illustrated, containing a strange written font, lengthy entries, and weird illustrated drawings including tons of sketches of naked women, inexplicably surrounded by Dr. Seuss-style tubes. Needless to say, historians have been puzzled, to say the least, and pop culture has adopted their own fantastical stories of what the book might actually mean. Well, according to Canadian computer scientists, they've deduced that the entire code is actually based on Hebrew letters and text. They released the first fully translated sentence from the book, which uncoded reads, quote, "She made recommendations to the priest, man of the house, and me and people," end quote. Needless to say, Israeli language experts and regular Hebrew speakers are less than impressed, considering this is not a real sentence. The study was apparently not done by anyone who even speaks Hebrew, and some of it was done through the not always reliable Google Translate. Another problem is that their breakdown uses only a simple letter substitution and anagram system, but who knows how the code may have actually been devised. So it looks like we'll just have to keep guessing what or if those bizarro drawings mean.
Now it looks like we might have another Israeli superstar following in Gal Gadot's footsteps on her way to the global stage. Fresh off of her hit performance in Evita here in Israel, pop-star Shiri Maimon is about to paint the town, starring in the upcoming Broadway revival of Chicago, which means pretty soon there's going to be a new name on everybody's lips.
Maimon first shot to local fame as a TV contestant on Israel's version of American Idol. That was 15 years ago, and she's been cranking out hit records one by one ever since. She's since become one of Israel's most iconic pop stars and faces in theater. She even repped Israel at the 2005 Eurovision competition, where she scored 4th place in the finals. So she's not exactly Miss Cellophane. But still, this bump to Broadway's center stage is stuff dreams are made of. Maimon's about to take her cue from the likes of Brooke Shields, Liza Minnelli, and Melanie Griffith, who all made career-turning Broadway performances as the iconic star of Chicago, Roxy Hart. Everyone here in Israel already knows how well Maimon can sing, but still, we're all pretty excited to see just how well she does the cell block tango.
Now it's time for our Hebrew word of the day. Israel's very own star of the stage is about to bring all that jazz and more to Broadway, so today we're talking about the bama, which means the stage. Now some love it, some hate it, but others were simply born for the bama, or the stage. Come on, we all know one or two people who just can't get enough of being up on the bama. It doesn't even have to be a big bama in a theater. Sometimes they don't even need a big audience. Sometimes a few friends in your living room is all the bama they need. As for me, you may not believe it, but I prefer the bama all to myself. That's why the shower is the ultimate bama of my choice. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight marks the beginning of another winter heat wave with clear skies and a rise in temperatures to a low of about 53 or 12 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow is expected to be partly cloudy with no change in temperatures and a high of about 76 or 24 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.45 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras, and thank you for watching.